Hey everyone, I'm on a mission to hit 1,000 subscribers, and I'd love your help to get there. If you're enjoying the content, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the family.
A head coach walks up to a podium, looks out at a room full of reporters, and says almost nothing. No depth chart update, no coronation, no clarity. Just careful, measured words that somehow communicated everything without confirming a single thing. And the reporters walked away with empty notebooks, while Cleveland Browns fans walked away with something far more interesting. Proof that this quarterback battle is real, it is raw, and it is absolutely not over. Welcome. If you're new here, this channel exists for one reason: to give you the actual story coming out of Berea, Ohio, without the corporate filter, without the pre-written narrative, and without the establishment spin that has plagued Cleveland Browns coverage for years. What we are doing today is going deep, all the way down into everything that happened at the cross-country mortgage campus during the 3 days of mandatory minicamp, June 9th, 10th, and 11th of 2026. Because those 3 days did not just add a chapter to the Cleveland Browns quarterback story, they blew the door off the hinges of a narrative that some very prominent voices in this media market had already decided was finished. They had the ending written, they had chosen their guy, and then SHEDEUR Sanders walked onto that practice field and made it impossible to look away. But here's the thing, and this is critical before we get into the specifics of what happened during those 3 days. You cannot understand what minicamp meant without understanding everything that came before it. This story did not start in February in a cold convention center in Indianapolis, when a brand new head coach stood in front of a microphone at the NFL Scouting Combine in February and said something that most people in that room either didn't fully process or chose not to believe. And everything that has happened since, every rep, every press conference, every quote, every raised eyebrow and loaded non-answer flows directly from that moment. So we are going back to the beginning. We are walking through this entire thing from the ground up, and by the time we are done, you will understand not just what happened at minicamp, but why it happened, what it means, and what is coming next. When TODD MONKEN took over as the Cleveland Browns' new head coach, the football world had a very specific set of expectations about how the quarterback situation was going to be handled. Deshaun Watson was the incumbent. He had the fully guaranteed $230 million contract hanging over the organization like a monument to a decision that had never quite worked out the way anyone had hoped. He had come back from not one, but 2 torn Achilles tendons, one in Week 7 of the 2024 season, one in January of 2025, missing the entirety of the 2025 campaign while SHEDEUR Sanders was out there running the offense as a rookie. Watson was the veteran. Watson was the known quantity. Watson, in the eyes of many observers, was simply going to be handed the keys when he got healthy enough to take them. And then, Monken walked up to that podium at the NFL Scouting Combine in February. A reporter asked him directly about his quarterback situation, and he said 3 names: SHEDEUR Sanders, Deshaun Watson, Dillon Gabriel. Not Watson first, not Watson with an asterisk next to everyone else. 3 names, equal footing, 0 hierarchy. And he meant it. Reports from that period made clear that Monken had already communicated internally that the reps were not going to be distributed equally just for the sake of appearances. They were going to be distributed in a way that gave his coaching staff the maximum possible information about every player on the roster. He was not here to manage feelings. He was not here to protect a contract or honor a narrative. He was here to build a winning football team, and that meant evaluating every single position with clear eyes. Now, that sounds simple. It sounds like standard coaching talk. But you have to understand what Monken was actually doing in that moment, whether he fully intended it or not. He was refusing to do what almost every other coach in that situation would have done. He was refusing to give Watson the soft coronation that would have made everyone's lives easier. He was refusing to let the size of the contract dictate the depth chart, and he was refusing to take the path of least resistance, which would have been to say, Deshaun is our guy, we're excited to have him healthy, and everyone else is competing for backup roles. He did not do that. He opened a real competition, and the moment he did, 2 things happened simultaneously. The media decided they already knew how it was going to end, and SHEDEUR Sanders started working. Let's talk about the media side of that equation first, because it is essential context for everything that followed. When Monken refused to name a starter, the reporters covering this team did what reporters always do when a coach won't fill in the blanks. They filled in the blanks themselves. And the story that started forming, week by week out of the voluntary OTAs in the spring, was built around a very specific and very convenient logic. Deshaun is the veteran, Deshaun has the experience, Monken runs a pro-style system, and pro-style systems favor veteran pocket passers over young athletic quarterbacks still learning their reads. Deshaun has this building, he knows the personnel, he has the relationships. SHEDEUR Sanders is a second-year quarterback who had a difficult rookie campaign. He's developing, he's learning, he's not ready. The inside track belongs to Watson, and when mandatory minicamp rolls around at the end of the spring program, Monken will check his notes and confirm what everyone already knows.
That was the story. That was the pre-written conclusion sitting in draft form on the laptops of several prominent Cleveland sports media voices heading into June. And to be fair, and this breakdown is going to be fair throughout, because that is what this channel does, there was something to it early on. During the voluntary OTA sessions, Watson was receiving a significant amount of first-team repetitions. His name was coming up in reports, he was the established presence in the room, the guy who had been here before, and some early coverage did reflect a genuine sense that the veteran was getting meaningful looks with the ones. That was real, that was accurate reporting of what was happening on the field in the early weeks of the spring program. But then something started shifting, the gaps started closing. As OTAs progressed into their final weeks, Sanders began performing at a level that made it harder to keep writing the Watson is ahead story without adding qualifiers. The coverage started hedging. It's not pads yet. We'll see when it gets real. Watson still has the experience advantage. And through all of that, TODD MONKEN kept standing at his podium and saying essentially nothing that confirmed the narrative everyone was trying to build around him. Patient, motionless, giving you exactly what he wanted you to have and nothing more. And then, June 9th arrived, and SHEDEUR Sanders walked onto that practice field, and everything changed. Before we get into the specifics of what happened on that first day of mandatory minicamp, it is worth taking a moment to understand the media environment that SHEDEUR Sanders has been operating inside of since before he was ever an NFL player. Because what happened in Berea during those 3 days in June did not happen in a vacuum. It happened inside a specific media ecosystem that had a very particular relationship with this young man, going all the way back to his days at Colorado. And understanding that ecosystem is the only way to fully appreciate why every positive development in his story gets treated differently than it would be for any other quarterback in a similar situation. SHEDEUR Sanders arrived in the NFL draft process in 2025, carrying a set of credentials that, on paper, were genuinely impressive. He had put up significant numbers at Colorado under his father's coaching system, he had measurables, he had the arm, he had the name recognition that came with being Deion Sanders' son playing at a program that had become one of the most watched in college football simply because of the family connection. But that name recognition was a double-edged sword in a way that most people don't fully acknowledge, because the attention that came with the Sanders name meant that the criticism came louder and from more directions than it would have for a prospect without that spotlight. Every incomplete pass at Colorado was analyzed through a lens that asked whether he was really a first-round talent or just a product of the platform. Every big moment was immediately followed by a question about whether the opponent was good enough to take the performance seriously. And when the pre-draft process started generating rumors about his attitude and team interviews, about his confidence level, about how he handled the process, those rumors spread with a velocity that reflected just how many people were watching and how many people had already decided what they thought of him before the evidence was fully in. He ended up going in the 5th round. The 5th round, after Dillon Gabriel, the Browns' own 3rd-round pick from that same draft. And the way that draft slide was covered in many corners of the football media world was essentially as a verdict. The market has spoken, the evaluators have spoken. He dropped because of the concerns that have always been there, and now he's a backup quarterback competing for a roster spot, and we should all recalibrate our expectations accordingly. That was the dominant framing.
Not every outlet, not every voice, but a significant and influential portion of the football media universe treated that fifth-round selection as the final word on what SHEDEUR Sanders was and what he could become. And then, his rookie season was difficult. The offensive line in front of him was not good. He absorbed pressure on more than half of his dropbacks during his starts, one of the highest rates among NFL quarterbacks that year. His average time to throw was hovering around 3 1/3 seconds, which is far too long for any quarterback to consistently survive in this league, let alone a young one still learning NFL reads and protections. The plays extended too long, the big shot was prioritized over the quick completion. The ball security at the combine had been a flag, and the ball security issues did not magically disappear when the games got real. It was a hard year. Nobody is pretending otherwise. But here is what matters, and here is what the easy narrative always glosses over. Those difficulties did not happen in a controlled environment. They happened on a bad football team, with a compromised offensive line, in a system that was not optimized for a young quarterback's development, in an organization that was in various stages of institutional chaos. The circumstances matter. Context matters, and a quarterback who absorbed pressure on more than half of his dropbacks and still managed to stay in the starting conversation, still managed to show enough to keep his coaching staff's attention, still managed to be the guy the new head coach included in his 3-name answer at the combine. That quarterback was not finished. He was starting.
June 9th, 2026. Cross Country Mortgage Campus, Berea, Ohio. First day of mandatory minicamp. The reporters have their notebooks ready. The storyline they've been building for months is about to be confirmed or complicated. And the first significant indicator of which direction this thing is heading comes in the 11-on-11 competitive drills, the closest thing to real football that a spring practice environment allows. SHEDEUR Sanders lines up with the first-team offense, not rotating, not splitting time in some diplomatic arrangement designed to keep everyone comfortable. First team. And what does he do with those repetitions? He locates Denzel Boston, the Browns' first-round rookie wide receiver, on a deep pass downfield. Touchdown. Then he comes back, goes through his reads, and finds Isaiah Bond, another wide receiver, on a deep shot. Touchdown. 2 big plays, 2 deep balls, 2 touchdowns in 11-on-11 competitive work on the first day of mandatory minicamp. Now let's be precise about what this means and what it does not mean, because this breakdown is not in the business of overclaiming. These are not padded practices. There is no live pass rush bearing down on the quarterback. The defensive backs are operating under certain restrictions that change the nature of the coverage. A completed deep ball in OTAs or minicamp is not the same thing as a completed deep ball in a regular season game with a defensive end trying to separate your throwing shoulder from the rest of your body. These are real limitations, and anyone who tells you otherwise is not being straight with you. But here is what a deep completion in 11-on-11 minicamp work does tell you, and it tells you this clearly. The quarterback can execute the throw. He can go through his progressions under at least simulated pressure, identify the open receiver downfield, trust his arm, and deliver the ball accurately enough to complete the play. The physical execution is there. The decision-making process is there. The confidence to take the shot and commit to it rather than check down or hold the ball is there. Those things are real. Those things matter. And those things are exactly what the criticism of SHEDEUR Sanders has always suggested were lacking or underdeveloped. And on the first day of mandatory minicamp, he walked onto that field and demonstrated all 3 of them before the afternoon was over. Then TODD MONKEN walked up to the podium, and he said something that you need to hear again if you heard it the first time, and you need to hear for the first time if you somehow missed it. When reporters asked him about Sanders after practice, Monken did not give a diplomatic non-answer. He did not say, "He had some good moments out there," or "We'll continue to evaluate." He said clearly and directly that Sanders performed admirably. He said that with every practice day, Sanders has been improving, every single practice session showing upward movement, and he said the trajectory is headed in the right direction.
Read that back. The trajectory is headed in the right direction. That is your head coach, the man who watches both of these quarterbacks every single morning with a clipboard and a critical eye and a professional responsibility to get this evaluation right, standing at a public podium and telling you that your young quarterback is on an upward curve. That is not casual. That is not a participation trophy comment designed to keep the locker room happy. That is a professional assessment delivered in public by the man with more information about this competition than anyone on the planet. And the information he chose to share with the world after day 1 was that SHEDEUR Sanders is trending upward. Day 2 brought a structural change that some people misread, and I want to address directly. As part of Monken's evaluation process, Sanders moved to second-team reps on the second day of camp. Some coverage framed this as a demotion, as Watson reasserting himself with the ones while Sanders got shuffled back down the depth chart. That framing is wrong, and here is why. Monken had been explicit from the beginning of the spring program that reps were going to be distributed in a way that maximized his coaching staff's ability to evaluate everyone. Rotating quarterbacks through first and second team groups is part of that process. It tells you different things about a quarterback than simply leaving one guy with the ones and watching what he does in a comfortable environment. Can he elevate a second team group? Can he make plays when his supporting cast is not loaded with the best players on the roster? Does his performance depend on having great receivers around him, or does the football intelligence translate regardless of who he's working with? And what Sanders did on day 2 of mandatory minicamp is something that does not get enough attention in the coverage of this competition. He connected with tight end Blake Whiteheart. He connected with tight end Brendan Bates. He worked through his reads with the backup offensive personnel and demonstrated a fluency with the system, a comfort in various formations and situations that was not dependent on having the first team skill players around him. The ball kept moving, the offense kept functioning, and the reads kept being made at a pace and with a decisiveness that reflected a quarterback who has genuinely internalized the system rather than just memorizing plays. Here is why that matters more than most people realize. Football intelligence in a quarterback is not just about throwing the ball to the right guy when everything is running smoothly and your best receivers are getting open. It is about what happens when the environment is less comfortable, when the tight end you're working with is not the most familiar face in the room, when the situation demands that you process faster, communicate clearer, and trust your instincts rather than relying on well-worn connections built over months of repetition. SHEDEUR Sanders spent day 2 of mandatory minicamp demonstrating exactly that kind of intelligence, and the people who have been arguing that he is not ready, that he cannot manage an NFL offense at this level, have to grapple with what those day 2 reps actually showed about this quarterback's development.
Day 3, June 11th, the final day of mandatory minicamp, the last evaluation session of the spring program before the extended summer break that precedes training camp. And TODD MONKEN does something on this final day that is, in my assessment, the single most structurally significant decision of the entire offseason. He splits the first team repetitions equally between SHEDEUR Sanders and Deshaun Watson. Equal, not weighted toward the veteran, not a final affirmation of Watson's status heading into the summer. Equal. Both men running with the ones on the last day of the spring evaluation period, getting the same looks, working with the same players, being assessed against the same standard. Think carefully about what this decision communicates. If you are a head coach who has spent the entire spring evaluating a quarterback competition and you have arrived at a conclusion, if the veteran has done enough to separate himself, if the experience advantage has translated into a meaningful performance gap, if the man with the big contract has shown you what you needed to see, you do not end the spring program with equal first-team reps for both players. You give the incumbent the reps. You let him build momentum heading into the summer. You let him establish his chemistry with the ones before the team disappears for 6 weeks. You create clarity. Everyone leaves understanding the hierarchy. Monken did not do that. He split them equally, and then he stood at the podium and said, directly, in plain language, without hedging or softening, that both Watson and Sanders have earned the right to begin this competition. Not one of them, both of them. And he added that he believes both quarterbacks are capable of playing winning football in 2026. Not hopeful, not optimistic in a vague, we'll see kind of way. He said he is certain of it. But the most important quotes from that final day, the ones that cut straight to the heart of what this entire competition is actually about, are the specific things Monken said about SHEDEUR Sanders' development. And I want to walk through these carefully, because they are not just compliments, they are a precise, technical description of what this quarterback has changed and why that change matters. Monken told reporters that Sanders is being more decisive with the football, that he seems to be making decisions more quickly, that the ball is leaving his hands more quickly. And then he said this, and this is the line that matters more than any other single quote from the entire spring program, that Sanders' ability to process information more quickly, get the ball out, and eliminate lost yardage plays will be enormous for the Browns' offense to stack plays and score points. Enormous. That is the word he used. Your head coach, the architect of a play-action-heavy downfield passing offense that depends on rhythm, timing, and the ability to convert first downs into scoring drives, used the word enormous to describe what SHEDEUR Sanders is doing in practice. That word is not accidental. That word is a direct, deliberate signal from a football coach who chooses his public language carefully, who has spent the entire spring giving you almost nothing, that something genuinely significant is happening with his young quarterback. And here is why that lands with the weight it does. The single greatest criticism that has followed SHEDEUR Sanders from Colorado to the Combine to his rookie season in Cleveland is precisely the issue that Monken is describing him as having resolved: the tendency to hold the ball too long, to search for the big play instead of taking the quick completion and living to fight on the next down, to let the clock run on his decision-making process when the NFL demands that those decisions happen in fractions of seconds. His average time to throw as a rookie was around 3 1/3 seconds. He was absorbing pressure on more than half his dropbacks. The analysis was clear, and it was fair. If Sanders was going to become the quarterback his talent suggested he could be, he had to speed up. He had to get the ball out. He had to trust his reads and let go. And now his head coach is standing at a public podium saying that is exactly what is happening. The criticism and the coach's praise are describing the same thing from opposite directions. That is not a small development. In the context of this quarterback's trajectory, that is potentially the most important development of the entire offseason. This breakdown would not be complete, and it would not be honest, without spending real time on Deshaun Watson, because he is half of this competition, and he deserves a fair assessment. And I want to be clear about something before we go any further. What Watson has gone through physically over the last 2 years is genuinely difficult. 2 torn Achilles tendons, 2 major surgeries, nearly 2 full years away from NFL practice fields. That is a brutal physical journey, and the fact that he's come back from it, worked through the entire voluntary off-season program, and is competing for a starting job is something that commands a certain level of respect regardless of everything else. Watson said the right things heading into and throughout the spring program. He told reporters during minicamp that for the first time since he tore his first Achilles in Week 7 of the 2024 season, he feels completely healthy. He talked about the value of participating in all 9 weeks of the off-season program, every voluntary OTA session, every minicamp practice, and what it meant to his preparation and his confidence. He talked about competing with the mindset that every player in that locker room should have if they want to start and succeed in this league. Those are the right words. That is a professional athlete putting his best face forward in a difficult situation, and it deserves acknowledgement.
But here is the reality that the numbers present, and honesty demands that we look at them directly. Since the Cleveland Browns made that historic trade and handed Watson a $230 million fully guaranteed deal, the largest fully guaranteed deal in NFL history at the time, his record as the Browns starter is 9 wins and 10 losses. His QB rating in Cleveland games has been below average.
Before injuries began rewriting the story of his tenure here, he played one full season in 2023. In 2024, before the first Achilles tear, he was 1-6. The entirety of 2025 was lost to the second surgery and recovery. And now, in the final year of that enormous contract, he is competing against a 24-year-old second-year quarterback who came into this spring and created a genuine race out of what many people assumed would be a quiet, foregone formality. That is the full picture, and the most telling thing about where this organization actually stands regarding Watson's future is not something Watson said or even something Monken said. It is a decision that was not made. The Browns could have protected Watson heading into this spring. They could have structured the offseason program to give him the first-team reps and the established chemistry and the natural momentum that comes with being the veteran quarterback in a new system. They could have made it easy for him. They chose not to. TODD MONKEN chose not to. And that choice, the choice to run a real competition rather than a scripted coronation, tells you more about where this organization's thinking actually sits than any press conference answer ever could. Watson, to his credit, is competing. He has not publicly complained, he has not created any reported friction around the competition structure. He is doing what a professional in his situation is supposed to do. But he is doing it from a position of genuine vulnerability, competing against a young quarterback who entered the spring hungry, focused, and determined to make the decision impossible to avoid. And Monken, to his great credit, has refused to make it easy on either of them. There's a category of evidence in this quarterback competition that gets less attention than the coach's quotes and the practice rep counts and the media narrative debates, and I want to spend some real time on it because it might actually be the most meaningful category of all. It is the testimony of people who have no political stake in the outcome, no relationship to manage, no narrative to protect. It is the testimony of people who are simply reporting what they see because what they see is what matters to them professionally. Specifically, I want to talk about Tyson Campbell. Campbell is a defensive back on this Browns roster. Every day in practice, he lines up against the quarterbacks. He sees them up close. He sees how they process, how they move through their reads, how quickly they identify the open receiver, and how accurately they deliver the ball when they do. He is not managing anyone's emotions. He is not calculating what the right thing to say is for the sake of team unity. He is not thinking about what his answer will look like in print. He is a player describing what he observes on a football field, and what he observed during this spring program is worth more than a dozen column inches of media speculation. Campbell, speaking openly during minicamp, said he has seen significant progress in SHEDEUR Sanders since joining the Browns last season. Significant, not marginal, not incremental, significant. He said Sanders is acting even more professionally than he did the previous year in terms of how he practices and how he carries himself in the building. He said Sanders is improving and becoming more comfortable making plays. Read that back. Your own defense, the people who line up against this quarterback every single day in practice, the people who benefit from him struggling and have zero incentive to talk him up, is telling you that he is changed, that he is better, that he is more professional and more comfortable and more capable than he was a year ago. That kind of testimony does not come with an agenda. It comes with authenticity. It comes from people who are reporting a reality they experience in real time every single morning on a football field in Berea. When your own defense starts endorsing your quarterback's development, something real is happening. That is not a narrative construct. That is not a media story being pushed by someone with an angle. That is the most direct possible form of evaluation, player against player, day after day, delivering a verdict that supports everything the coaches have been saying from the podium. And yet somehow that voice gets crowded out by another round of debate about whether minicamp reps really count without pads. Tyson Campbell's testimony counts. It counts a lot. And it is part of a pattern of corroboration around SHEDEUR Sanders' development that is becoming very difficult to dismiss. The culture story around Sanders this offseason goes beyond what has happened on the practice field, and to understand it fully, you have to go back to the winter, to the period right after Monken announced that the quarterback competition was going to be real and open. That announcement could have landed as bad news for Sanders. A new coach coming in and refusing to hand you the job despite your starting experience the previous season is not exactly a ringing endorsement.
A lot of young quarterbacks in that situation would have shown some frustration, some edge, some uncertainty about where they stand.
Sanders did the opposite. On national television, responding to the competition announcement, he said that is exactly what he expected. He said he has to prove himself every single day to his coaches, to his teammates, and to himself. He laid out a framework built around small objectives, incremental landmarks, modest daily victories that add up over time to something larger. He talked about the competition the way a mature professional athlete talks about competition, not the way a second-year quarterback who expected to be handed a starting job talks about having that assumption challenged. Now compare that to the story that was circulating about SHEDEUR Sanders during the 2025 draft process, the rumors about his attitude in team interviews, the questions about his confidence, the speculation about how he handled the draft slide. Whether any of that was accurate or fair is a separate conversation, and this channel's position is that a significant portion of it was neither. But the contrast between that narrative and the person sitting in front of cameras in the spring of 2026 discussing gradual development and process-oriented growth with the calm of someone who has done serious work on their mental approach to the game is striking. That is not the same person the rumors were describing. Whatever has happened in the year between that draft process and this spring, whether it is the experience of his rookie season, the relationship with the new coaching staff, the self-reflection that comes with surviving a difficult year and coming out the other side, something has shifted in how SHEDEUR Sanders carries himself and how he approaches his work. TODD MONKEN noticed it. Reports from early in the spring indicated that Monken personally observed during NFL league meetings that Sanders had been consistently working out and studying film in the facility during the offseason, while other quarterbacks in the room had not put in the same kind of time. He was in the building. He was putting in the hours before anyone was asking him to. He was building the foundation before the evaluation officially began. And when the spring program started, he was not starting from zero. He was building on months of quiet, unannounced preparation that set him apart from the beginning. In 5 weeks, the pads go on in Berea. The real bullets start flying. The defensive linemen start running at full speed, and the quarterback competition that TODD MONKEN has been conducting with patience, fairness, and an absolute refusal to take the easy path forward will enter its most revealing phase yet. What happens between late July and those August preseason games against Chicago and Buffalo will determine which direction this franchise points its future. But regardless of how training camp unfolds, regardless of which quarterback walks out of that process as the starter in Week 1, the story of this spring is already complete. And the story of this spring is that a young man who was counted out more times than he deserved, who went in the 5th round when people thought he should never have been drafted at all, who struggled through a rookie season in difficult circumstances and watched a new coaching staff arrive and open the competition rather than hand him anything. That young man showed up, put in the work, earned equal first-team reps on the final day of mandatory minicamp, and had his head coach stand at a podium and use the word enormous to describe what his development means for this offense. TODD MONKEN will not answer the question when he is not ready to answer the question. He will stand at that podium and give you exactly what he is prepared to give you and nothing more. And right now, the reason he is not ready to answer is not that Watson has done enough to end the conversation. It is that SHEDEUR Sanders has done enough to keep it alive. And a quarterback who keeps the conversation alive at 24 years old in his 2nd NFL season after everything this young man has been through is a quarterback who is just getting started. The pads go on in 5 weeks. This channel will be there for every rep, every development, and every moment that matters. Make sure you are too.